Safety is a big deal for me, and I really hadn't ever talked about it, but I was in a near miss. My first experience inside of a big industrial facility, in fact, one that's going through some very dramatic changes at the moment. Paper mill industry has been huge in this part of the country for, a long time, 50, 60, 70 years. Everything has a life cycle. It starts and it grows, and then it gets to big, and then it just gets humongous. I got to experience part of that largesse back in the early 90s. During college, I worked there inside of the number 2 mill, the board mill as it's called, and I worked in the tissue mill one Christmas break. And of course, I got to experience the industrial environment and made really good money. I think at the time, we were making, several dollars per hour above minimum wage. So that really helped out. In fact, it gave me the ability to save money during the summers and have enough to pay a lot of things for the fall and winter semester. But when I was there, I made a really dumb mistake. It's one of those mistakes where you can't see past the end of the day. I couldn't see past 3 seconds. It's the stupid thing that I did. I don't even want to talk about it. I'm not going to talk about it. Right before that, I had been talking to some guys at a deer camp. There was 2 of those guys. There was and had some early ties here and roots here, but they'd moved out to other places, and was at that John F. Kennedy Memorial Park and Dam up there. I think he was the chief over that for a number of years and held other offices as well, and I believe he had advanced degrees. And I can't remember exactly what did, and he may still be alive. I don't know, I have to verify it. But I had a conversation with these guys at a deer camp, and of course, I was about 18, and people ask you that kind of thing. What you gonna do with your life? And these guys started talking college. And then they started deciding what I was going to do. And they said, man, a great job. It's going to be huge, and it's going to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow and grow for a long time to come. And how you can make sure that you have a very solid, stable career is to go into safety, workplace safety. That's the big thing. That's what you need to get into. I didn't really go directly to it. That's a big responsibility. It's like, to me, a safety person at a location is the same thing as a doctor. It's a very big role. You're responsible for keeping people alive. You are responsible to prevent people from getting injured in the workplace. That's huge. And of course, the thing now, what's called new safety, and my friend and I have been discussing, there's a philosophy that goes along with it. A whole new philosophy. There's a bunch of thought leaders inside of this field, and there's all kinds of really great things going on with safety right now. And of course, a lot of the philosophy that I've learned from and he revolves around what he calls SRP. It just fascinated me so much. This is what the SRP.
Safety, reliability, and productivity.
One of the major points of this is reducing the amount of interaction between a person and a process, or a person and a machine, person and something that's moving. And of course, that's one of the things of OSHA. Whenever you talk about PPE, it's kind of just a really extreme version of that same philosophy, which is, you want to keep people away from risks. First thing you do is you create rules and say, well, you can't go there. And then, you put up a barrier to keep people from going there. And then, like in the case of PPE, they would then retrofit them with various devices and such that will keep them as safe as you could possibly can inside of the environment that you keep people out of. You go into a safety role, it's a huge responsibility, it's a huge task, it's a process of teaching people a lot of different philosophies. And of course, the way that you teach it, little stories and metaphors that describe on the inside and the outside of what it is, that is what it is and what it isn't. I've already told you one part of it, which is the part that OSHA gave us, which is you got to keep people away from machines and processes. But one key thing that I'll let you know, and I'm going to read you a direct quote. This one is widely available, goes right along with the whole thing that I have been talking about, and it's really eloquent. And this is a quote from Sidney Dekker. That's SYDNEY space DEKKER. And what he said is that you want to understand why it made sense for people to do what they did in their context, and not yours, and not yours, and not yours. You want to keep people away from machines at all costs. And not just because OSHA says it, or not because OSHA requires you to have PPE, but for something deeper. Is that anytime you have any of the things that I talked about, any more than you can have people there. In other words, if a person doesn't belong in an area, they don't need to be in that area. because they have not been properly trained on how to do things in that area. And it could be a life and death thing too. If you're not trained to be in the area, you shouldn't be in that area. So there's a new safety. Rewinding that, I'm 48 years old. We're talking about something that occurred 48. I'm still 47, so I'm still 17, 30 years ago. But I'm about to be 18 just a few months. So you're talking about things that were occurring 30 years ago. So these are things that have been floating through my head for a long time as far as the safety goes. I had this big influence back then, and of course, I didn't understand it exactly. But when I first went to, as far as the summer student program that I talked about earlier, put us through 3 weeks that we sat inside of a classroom. And we went through like an OSHA 30 class. We went on various tours, like we'd learn something in the class, and then carry us out on tours of the facilities. Make you look at what you just learned. In other words, easy examples like about fork trucks. If you're going to learn about putting fuel in a fork truck, well, obviously you have to go learn how to put fuel in a fork truck. And if you're going to be behind a machine cleaning up something, as in the case of what I did, we kept the behind the machine as clean as I possibly could. And the rest of the time you did other things, just kind of walk around and clean up. Carried me back there to the tanks around back. So these are clay tanks. This here's the coating that goes on the paper, and this is, so just stop right here. You're going off into other areas, and we'll just stay back here on the back side back here. Really won't hurt a lot. Part of my job was the paper machine wasn't producing paper. You'd get a buildup of pulp, and a lot of times it would spew over, and it would be huge amounts of it back there on the back side from the Whitty and all the way up out into other areas. That's a very complicated process. When you're turning a tree into paper, a tree is a hard thing that grows out of the ground. You've got to cut it and then chop it up into fine enough pieces that it's sprayed over a screen and then through rolling dryers real fast and stay a sheet of paper. It's really a miraculous thing whenever you come to think about it. And of course, another part of that is a real, just to kind of throw it out there, I recently had to replace my birth certificate. I really hadn't seen the thing in years. And this is right after the announcement of the layoffs that were out at the paper mill. And of course, I got to looking at it. On my birth certificate is the words paper mill, father's occupation. I'm not the only one. A lot of folks around here that I've talked to since that happened, their fathers were paper makers in some way or the other. It was a proud tradition. Guys, during heyday, a hay out is whenever the paper breaks. When it's not good if it hays out in any paper mill. But heyday, the good days of being in the paper industry, it was really great. I mean, it was a lot of money made. There was a lot of money spent around town. A lot of things was created and given to the city. But everything has a life cycle, just like every human being and every business and everything has a high point and a low point, has a high point and a low point, has a high point and a low point. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the paper industry is completely dead here. We have no idea what's going to happen here in the next 5 or 10, 15, 20 years. There's a glut of trees, so it may not be making paper, but there'll be other things going on. There may be some paper making, who knows? So, things are changing. Of course, with me, I learned a lot from here. There's a lot of people that learned a lot from here. It was like such a great experience to be able to experience that I've referred to, of going in and learning about safety, having experiences inside an industrial environment to understand, the need for safety, the need to keep people safe. And now, other topics I want to talk about. We talked about the safety in the paper industry. The newest industry that I've been learning about. Over the years, I worked in all kinds of fabrication and
chemical industry.
Huge way. A lot of
aerospace and defense stuff.
Because it's so big in our general part of the country. But a new one that I've gotten into in the past couple of years, and this is the food industry. And I'm learning a lot about it right now. Food industry is, it's a totally different kind of animal.
Farming and milling.
What I'm talking about is
it's a different kind of animal
than the
family farm
that I grew up on. Now, it's a huge difference. I'm talking about going to the
paper mill.
Before that, I lived on a farm, a family farm, 67, 68 acres. Of course, on there was raising
tomatoes,
various fruits and such. And tomatoes were raised in the back. There was cows and horses and pigs and such in the middle and at the barn. It's like kind of a
self-sustaining farm.
I just assumed that everybody everywhere in the world lived on a farm. That's why that conversation with those guys about safety was kind of blew my mind. Like, what? On a farm, you try to take care of each other the best you could. And even then, it's a dangerous industry. There's a lot of moving parts, like the dude on the Big Lebowski.
Lots of strains in their dude's mind,
But, so it is kind of a dangerous thing. A lot of people have been injured and killed from farming. It's living close to the land. back on a family farm, because you're involved in such things. Speaking of safety, for sure, you're around
Animals.
and you've got a neighbor idea that one of their sons got kicked in the head by a horse. And then, there's things you got to do. You have to be able to slaughter animals. You have to be able to go feed pigs or cows or whatever every day, and then to be able to kill those pigs and put them in a barrel of hot water and scrape the hair off of them. And you have to be able to do lots of things. You're just a very, it's a different world. You're living that close to the land. You're eating animals that grow right there on you. And of course that includes hunting deer and such in the winter. I grew up like that, killed a few deer, help clean a few. The men get done. It's typically what happened out the barn. Then you carry it inside. The women, they'd process it. Grandma would be the leader, and they would do the ribs and the hams and this and that and the other. And some of it would be put in sugar or salt or whatever, and they'd put it out in the curing barn. And there was one exception. That one exception was
Chickens.
The men really weren't involved in that unless there were a whole bunch of them. But I've seen my grandmother go out there and grab one by its neck, 2, 3, pop that neck, and then clean them. And cleaning chickens is a hell of a task. I know that from working in industry as well. I worked in that kind of food industry before as far as animals. Well, if you've been in the South or Central Arkansas, you worked with chickens.
I have.
Employing lots of people doing that kind of work. It's amazing what deboners in a chicken factory can do. Those guys, man, or women, whoever it is, and that knife.
Truly amazing.
Going back to the farm, though.
The family farm where I grew up.
So back there behind the house, there was a garden. That would be like your
3 to 5 acres.
There was a pasture there, but it flooded a lot during the winter, which made it just prime, just great farmland up in that area. Just carry all the silt and drop it there, and you could grow all kinds of things, and beans, any kind of fruit and vegetable you can think. A few tomatoes.
Eating tomatoes.
Potatoes are typically kind of done in the back there and dig them up. A lot of work, though. A very dirty job if you hadn't got the right kind of equipment, and even if it's still pretty hard work. And then, of course, there was always something new going on.
Papa would, or Grandma would,
Mom and Papa, what I'd call them, they would get the, different kind of vines going up. So, they'd try grapes, or they would try some sunflowers, or they would try some blackberry bushes, specific ones, and grow them, and frame it up, and do all the things you had to do, and have a good crop, homemade cobbler. Another thing I'd see was in the kitchen, Grandma, she would make the pie crusts of dough that was cooked. Just all kinds of things with it.
always cooking on his...
Cook. My uncles and such would come by, and there'd be people would go down to the Saline River, and there was a camp there, and you would go down there and you'd fish, and you go down there Friday night and you fish all day Saturday, come home Saturday night and get to cooking around lunch and cook up all the fish you'd fish for all day Saturday and clean all night Saturday night. And then you'd look up in the driveway, and
On Sunday afternoon,
there'd be 30 or 40 vehicles lined up and down the road. Everybody coming up to eat, fellowship, have a good time. It was a different world than what I live in right now, for sure. The ways of the world has changed. That was in
the 70s.
early 80s. So that's kind of the twists and turns. I kind of caught the tail end of the farming thing too. So I've seen two things kind of die out in my lifetime. I've seen
the family farm die out, and then here recently I've seen the paper industry make a big reduction.
So that's the things I've been thinking about. That's my midsummer check-in. It's a beautiful time to be alive. There's a lot of changes going on inside of the industry, which it pays me. It's a busy time. There's a huge demand for good people that have experience and are looking for work. There's all kinds of things going on. And it's a very exciting time. A lot of change going on. There's a lot of social change, mechanical change. We talk about manufacturing right now as being in big demand. And it's huge demand.
The manufacturing, assembly, production, extraction, the oil and gas industries
and such. Those are big right now, but these are not jobs where you just drop out in the 9th or 10th grade, get you a job and live happily ever after. The kind of jobs these days, you gotta have some advanced training, you gotta have some certificates, a couple-year degree though. Will situate you really to make some really good money. You go out in the labor force and make money in the types of environments I was talking about earlier, where you need this new safety. You need a new awareness of what's going on, and companies need a new way to protect workers from the new things that are going on.
Because there's all kinds of new risks they wouldn't even understand just yet.
We try to keep a watch on what's going on, and as things are changing and such.
So that's checking in. We're going to check out now.
Let you get on with your business. Oh, I hear an ambulance way out on Highway 82. I hope you're having fun and being safe, and that there aren't any sirens after you. Over and out.